I'm going to start off by introducing Sarah Moore. Sarah is the news director at ABC Action News in Tampa. She started there in June of 2015 as the assistant news director and was promoted to news director in January of 2019. Sarah started her career in 1999 as an intern at News Channel 5 in Nashville, Tennessee. She ended up working there for 13 years as a producer and an executive producer. In 2012, she went to Indianapolis to become the executive producer at WTHR in Indianapolis, and she spent 3 years there. Sarah is a graduate of Middle Tennessee State University, and in her career, Sarah has been a part of covering big stories like the Pulse nightclub shooting, Hurricane Irma, and the Nashville flood of 2010. So that is Miss Sarah Moore. We also have Ray Roa on our panelists. Ray started freelancing for Creative Loathing Tampa, in January 2011 and was hired as music editor in August of 2016. He became editor-in-chief in August of 2019. Past work can be seen at Suburban Apologist, Tampa Bay Times, Consequence of Sound, and The Daily Beast. So that is Mr. Ray Roa. And we also have Alexis Jones. Alexis graduates from the University of South Florida in spring of 2020. She already graduated. As a student, she interned at WFLA and at Fox 13. Now she's a morning reporter for WTBA 9 News. Alexis covers breaking news in Mississippi. She shoots, writes, and edits all of her stories. Yes, a wonderful MMJ. She also has experience producing and anchoring for WTVA's weekend broadcasts. So that is our amazing panelists.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and start the conversation. Deanne, you're just basically to give all of our participants an idea of what's going on. Again, I'm Jasmine Stiles. We'll do a clubhouse thing. We'll reset the room. I'm Jasmine Stiles. I'm the president of TBABJ. So we are going to just kind of have a organic discussion with our panelists and our lovely moderator. We are going to ask that you save your questions until the end. We're going to go about an hour, worst case scenario, an hour and a half. If our panelists are going, we don't want to stop them from giving you all gems that you could really use in the search for a new job. But if you do have something, if you feel like you don't want to ask something, you can, or out in the open, you can always chat to me personally or to Deanne personally, and we can make sure that we have it at the end in case you just are feeling a little embarrassed about your question. But you shouldn't. There's no such thing as a dumb question. Everyone's learning here. Again, we are living in unprecedented times, so there's nothing that you could ask that probably would not help somebody else. So Deanne, I'm going to let you lead the conversation.
All right, thanks, Jasmine. So again, this is like really chill, really free flowing here. And so we want you all to be a part of the conversation. Again, we're going to save the question and answer period toward the end of our conversation. But really, especially if, kind of like Jasmine mentioned, if you have a question that you want me to ask during the main conversation, just shoot me a message in the chat and I will do so. So let's go ahead and start things off. I kind of really just want to start with the basics and allow people to understand what our panelists do currently. So I want to start with Sarah. And Sarah, if you can explain your role as a news director at ABC Action News.
My role as news director is just to make sure that we are living our brand every day. So I supervise the overall production of news. The assistant news director does more of the day-to-day work. So more of the script approval and individual story approval. That often goes through the assistant news director. The news director works on big picture strategy, works on hiring. So what we're here to talk about, I spend a lot of my time on hiring and big project planning. Those are the things that eat up most of my day. And yeah, anything. I fill in the gaps on anything that needs to be done. I think that's what a lot of producers would also tell you they do. And I did come up through the producer ranks. So filling in on anything that just needs to get done before news time.
All right, thanks, Sarah. So let's move over to Alexis. If you could just explain your role as a journalist currently.
I go out and I shoot, edit, and write all of the news stories. well, my news stories. I also go live 8 times a day. So I'm live from 4:30 in the morning to 8:30 in the morning. I also, on the weekends, if they need somebody to fill in, I will anchor and produce. So on the weekends, we don't have a producer. So the anchor is the producer of their show. So I get that type of experience as well as anchoring. So yeah, just go out and get the content.
Sounds good. Right, let's get an explanation of what you do every day.
Yeah, so my job really changed a lot after the layoffs here, which were just about a year ago. So after that,
Did Ray stop for y'all too?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll wait to see if he's able to rejoin us.
I'll text. He was trying to fix his audio issues beforehand, so let me just,
Okay.
it says, no, let me see.
Sounds good. So it's okay. We'll move on with the conversation here. We're in news. Technology fails us every day. So anywho, I kind of want to start the conversation off with hiring because I know that's a really big thing. Kind of like briefly about myself, I went to USF and I know that hiring process, I was just in y'all's shoes not too long ago. I've actually only been in the business for 3 years. So I know hiring is something that really gets on the minds, especially of a lot of seniors and a lot of juniors, because you're like, I'm about to cross the stage and I need a job. So we have a lot of people here who can answer those questions for you. I want to start off with Sarah. She is a news director. So I kind of want to, what do you look for when it comes to a reel? We know the reel is one of the biggest keys to getting a job. So if you can explain that for us.
Sure. Well, I think right now it's a little different. Because one of the things that they always will tell you about a reel, and probably what many of you have heard if you've ever taken a class that has talked about putting together a reel, they're going to talk about all your live shots up front, all your most active stand-ups, and that kind of thing is at the top of the reel. I'm going to guess that many of you don't have access to doing those things right now. Most people, even out in the industry, have been doing far less of that lately. So that is not going to be something that I'm going to see on a lot of reels. So what I'm looking for now is that your editing and shooting is as good as it can be. Do not put blue video on a reel. Do not do jump cuts on a reel. Put your very best stuff. Even if you liked a story, if it is not edited well, please go back and edit it again, because you will get one shot at me watching your second story on your reel. Make sure the top of that reel, the editing and shooting, because that is something that, at least in my shop, we're not able to go back and retrain those kinds of skills. You need to come in with those. We can work on quite a few things in storytelling and those kind of things, but with editing and shooting, it needs to be really strong right at the top. And I believe most people do understand that, like Alexis can tell you, you're going to start out MMJing, you're going to start out doing it all. So you will need to have those skills just as good as any photojournalist coming out of school. The other thing I really look for on a resume tape is a natural voice. Making sure that it does not sound like you are trying to sound like a news person, making sure it sounds like you are just talking to friends while you're doing your voicing. I always recommend standing up when you do your voicing and using your hands, just like you do when you talk, as long as you use your hands when you talk, which most people do. Make sure to do that when you're voicing your packages, because it makes a huge difference on whether you sound natural. And that's one of the first things that will have me turning off a reel, is if it sounds like you're reading the phone book to me and you're very uncomfortable. Then I would say that you should showcase original reporting as much as possible. It's commodity stories, the stuff that you would do off of press releases won't stand out. That will be on everybody's reel. So try to showcase towards the top of your reel where you've done original reporting using sources. That will get your attention. And I think it's something more newsrooms are looking for now than ever before. So focus on that.
Some very good advice here. Thanks, Sarah. Now, before I continue the conversation about Reels with Alexis, Ray is back on here. So I want to give the floor back to him so that he can explain and go into more detail about what he does on a daily basis.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. So basically it's two of us here editorially. We have a paper that we have to put out. So I'm doing reporting when I can, which is a lot less often now, but I still do have to do a lot of calling around, bothering people, sometimes occasionally making people mad, but I'm also accepting pitches from a very devoted and excellent team of freelancers. I'm editing those stories. I pass them to my web editor, Colin, who's not here right now. He gets them online, posts them on social. I code them for a newspaper. So I don't know how many of you are using InCopy and whatnot, but I do all that. Pass it to design, which is a freelance position, gets sent back to me, proof out, all that stuff. So we put out a weekly book every Thursday. We have a Tuesday overnight deadline that we have. And we have a website that is we're very proud of and is robust, and we try to keep that going. So we're lucky to have a nice team of contributors. I know you're talking about hiring. We haven't hired anybody back since the pay cut or the staff cuts. But I have brought on a lot of freelancers, which is, I suppose, the next best thing for us and maybe for the freelancers.
All right, thanks, Ray. And while you're speaking, Ray, Sarah was basically explaining what she looks for when she's hiring someone, especially with the real aspect. Can you explain what you would be looking for? Let's say, for example, those job openings do open up, and especially for print. What should aspiring journalists be doing as far as showcasing their work when it comes to print journalism and trying to get a job?
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing somebody who's in TV talk about what the things they're looking for and how sometimes you only get one shot, and visually, TV is a lot less forgiving, and print certainly is a little bit more forgiving in that, you might not send me your best first draft, but it doesn't mean that you won't get another shot with us at this particular paper. I am looking for some similar things as Sarah. I'm not looking for somebody who's a robot who rewrites press releases, although I do love a very well-written press release. A lot of times we do write off of press releases, but we try to ask additional questions that aren't in there because obviously the press release will leave things out. So while we might not need you to have like all original reporting in that sense, we would like you to be able to identify some of the things that are left out, some of the questions you would like to ask of the person sending the press release or people who are involved. So we're really interested in that curiosity and the willingness to maybe not ask that question to that person in power right away, but to come to your editor and say, hey, I think we should ask this question, and then we make that happen. We have a very hands-on editing process. I like to go through all of it with our freelancers and like to grow together. So yeah, that's what I look for. I want you to stay within word count. If it's print, if you take photos, high-res photos that work on web, and work in print, then that's great too. And obviously clean copy is great. We don't need another Hunter S. Thompson per se. But we want you to be colorful in your copy, but just super clean, which sometimes isn't always the case. But we've been pretty lucky to have very clean copy coming in for us. So clean copy, stay within spec. Don't be afraid to ask me questions. It may take me a day or two to get back with you, but at least me specifically, I'll always kind of work with you, and I'm very good at saying no. I don't like to ignore people if it's not going to work out.
Great advice here. Thank you. I want to, bring in Alexis in this conversation as far as resume reel. So as like you were just recently a student, what did you do with your reel? What did it look like? What would you tell folks who are currently in college to do, especially right now in the pandemic?
So when I graduated, that was like the beginning of the pandemic. So everybody was freaking out. Everybody's like, okay, we got to shut down the school. Nobody could touch equipment. So all I had was my cell phone. And what I did was I grabbed my mom, I grabbed friends. I said, look, pay for your dinner, your lunch. Just come with me and you're gonna shoot my stand-up. And so I shot a bunch of just creative and demonstrative stand-ups. I don't know if Jeanette noticed, but I would send her scripts for my stand-up so she can proof them. Just like, hey, Jeanette, do you think this sounds okay? And she would like, yeah, Alexis, I would just change this, I would change that. And so I would go forward with that after she proofed it. She'd go shoot them. And also when it came to my reel, I think I wasn't afraid to be annoying, which, I mean, I think that's really important during a pandemic is don't be afraid to annoy people. You met people, your professors, people at internships, or people just at different events like this. And so I think not to be afraid to say, hey, can you check my reel? Can you let me know if there's anything I need to improve? And then when they tell you, hey, this you could do better in, and then you follow up with them, hey, I did this. Do you think this is okay? So I think that was really what I did when it came to my reel. I wasn't afraid to be annoying to my mom, to my friends, and to mentors.
Feeding off what you just said, Alexis, I want to ask Sarah, I think it's interesting. I'm somebody who has, quote unquote, a lot of mentors. And so as Alexis was saying, don't be afraid to be annoying and reach out to each and everybody and ask for that feedback. But Sarah, what advice would you give to students when it comes to being receptive to that feedback and realizing what things you should actually change or implement into your resume reel, because you're getting so much feedback and hearing from so many voices, you might not know what to do?
Sure. Well, with who to listen to, I guess that's one thing. If you're getting a lot of different voices telling you a lot of different things, look at a newsroom that you want to be in. Maybe not now, maybe you realize realistically that's not a newsroom for you now, coming straight out of school, but you're thinking your 5-year plan, your 6-7-year plan, you want to be there. What I would do is try to find a mentor in that newsroom to mentor you to that style of newsroom, because every newsroom has a different style, and whatever you're passionate about as the newsroom you want to end up in. Do you want to end up in a big breaking news newsroom? Then I would listen to the advice of the news directors, the anchors, the MMJs from a newsroom that's like that. If you're looking for something that is does more enterprise reporting, pick a mentor out of that kind of newsroom. That would be my advice on who to listen to. I would also make sure you don't let anybody's advice change who you are or what you believe in about journalism. You should never. Hopefully you all are in this because of a passion that you have for some particular thing you want to do to better the world, whatever that is. And so you want to make sure that that doesn't get lost in too much consultant style advice, because that could get lost if you listen to too many voices. That being said, knowing that you always need to learn from people that have more experience than you, you need to be open and willing to the feedback. And whether you agree with the feedback or not, I would thank people for the feedback, because it does take time to mentor someone, even short term. It takes time to watch a tape and write up a critique. And you never know when you are going to encounter someone again. So even if you don't agree with the critique, I would make sure to be very gracious about receiving it.
I have learned that this business is small, like small. So you never know who you're going to see again, or that connection that one person has to another person that has to another person who's the news director of the job that you want. Like you never know. News gets really small at a certain point. So thank you for that, Sarah. Alexis, I wanted to bring you in as well. So kind of talk about some of the things that you did in your stand-ups to make it a little bit more unique. What did you do to basically make that stand out reel in order to snag your job?
Well, one thing that I did was I tried to, so we're in a pandemic. And so I wanted the news director to know that, hey, I know what's going on at that time. So I'm gonna do my stand-ups about situations that were going on. And so one of those stand-ups I did was I did a stand-up on how to create your own mask at home. And so one of my stand-ups was me sitting at a table explaining to people how they can fold a mask using the 2 rubber bands and a t-shirt and just like putting it on my face. So I think I did a lot of stand-ups I did a stand-up at a gas station. I did a stand-up showing that me pumping gas and excuse me, and showing that I forgot either gas was going down during the pandemic or it was going up, but I did a stand-up showing me pumping gas during that time. At first, all my stand-ups was just me in front of the camera. And I had a news director told me, you know, kind of switch it up. Don't try to stay in one spot. And so that's what I try to do. I try to find different stand-ups and different scripts that can be demonstrative and not just in one place and just me in front of a camera.
Some good advice, Sarah. Ray, what about you? What advice would you give to make sure someone is standing out when it comes to applying for a job right now as far as print goes?
It was interesting to hear Alexis talk about the mask making, because we picked up a slideshow from another market that was basically how to make a mask. And, you know, for her, she was trying to stand out by talking about things that were relevant. But, you know, for us specifically at the Alt Weekly, going back to what I said earlier, the things that make you stand out are, and I understand that this might be hard and you don't want to put your neck out there, but, you know, trusting that the other person, me, who I certainly want to mentor you if we're talking and work with you, there are no stupid questions. Flesh that story out with me. Say, you know, well, what about this? What about this? Like, even if it's as basic as a restaurant opening, which we write about, I'll use Haiku in downtown Tampa as an example. It's going in a place that was once connected with Franklin Manor. And we know how that went if you're a local person. And we knew that our readers had a lot of questions about whether or not Franklin Manor is still involved. Some of them still have questions, which I can't report on because I haven't fleshed those things out. But our contributor, our freelancer, asked that question, and she really wanted to figure that out. And she wasn't content taking, the press release at face value, and she wanted to make sure because she was thinking about the reader. So I think for me, what makes you stand out is great care, maybe empathy for the person on the other end of the screen, and for the person reading your news, even if it's a restaurant opening. Everybody matters on the other end, not to go down that path, or but think about the reader, and if you can show that and help me grow by saying, hey Ray, why don't we ask this question, and not being afraid to challenge my edit too, then that will definitely make you stand out. And again, clean copy, stay on spec, timing, all that stuff's great, and really goes a long way in our newsroom, our news operation.
Looping Sarah in when it comes to news, what are some things, what are some cliches that you feel news directors are probably sick of seeing when it comes to different types of stand-ups, especially from college students, because it's kind of hard to put live shots, on a college reel. So what are some cliches that it's kind of like, don't even try it? And what are some good things that folks can do to stand out on their reels?
That's a good question. I used to see more cliches when I lived up north. There was always some cold weather cliches that I would see, like throwing hot water in the air to see it turn into snow, those kind of things. But, I don't know that there is something I've seen where there's too much of it. If you're thinking of anything, maybe I'm not thinking of, but honestly, the only thing that stands out to me when it's the only thing I see is like Alexis talked about. If it's constantly a kind of a stiff, I would almost call it network style, where they're just standing centered in front of the camera. Oftentimes those look disconnected from a story. And I have seen that happen where someone's trying to put together a reel and they don't have enough packages that they've worked on. They will create stand-ups that are disconnected from an overall package. And while I think that is something that you can absolutely do, it really stands out when you're doing a stand-up that isn't connected to anything. You're not connected to your environment, or you're not connected to the action of making masks or something like that. It kind of stands out that it was almost, an afterthought stand-up done just for a reel. And, that won't grab the attention of a news director very often, but I can't think of a cliche.
Hey, boss lady, I just wanted to interject. When you're saying stand-ups that are disconnected from the actual package, are you saying more so of like, for example, one of the more popular stand-ups and packages are bridge stand-ups, something when you don't necessarily have enough video, but it's like, I got to get you to A to B, so let me put myself in here and find a creative way to connect you from this part of the story to this part of the story. Are you more so talking about when you can kind of tell like, crap, I got to put a stand-up in this story, so I'm gonna just wait till the end, walk up to the camera, say what I got to say, and then sig out? That's more what you're saying?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I mean, if you're using it as a bridge, or you're using it to make sure that your connection to the story is clear, even if you can't do a whole lot of demonstrative stuff, it usually plays well. It's always important, in my opinion, and this might just be old school producer in me, but writing your story in order: intro, package, tag. You're naturally going to write your stand-up as you're writing your story, and that's going to be part of the storytelling. If you go back to insert a stand-up after you've already constructed your whole story, there's going to be no point to it. It's going to be extra stuff that clearly didn't make the cut the first time you wrote the story, and so will seem very disconnected.
Really quick, Alexis, when thinking outside of the box for your stand-up, what were you thinking about when you were writing your stories, especially in college during a pandemic? You don't really know, or you're basically trying to tailor it around things that are going on in real time. What is your mindset when it comes to, okay, how can I piece together a unique, creative stand-up that will make me stand out?
So you asked me what was just going through my head as I was thinking of stand.
Yeah, how do you approach it?
So I just thought, okay, they're probably going to see this story told thousands of times, the stand-up scene thousands of times, just like when we're watching the news and it's the same topic, but the reporter can make it look totally different just because they decided to do something different with it. And so then that's what I was just going through my head was, how can I tell this story that they're probably going to hear and see, but just show it differently?
Yes, yes, that makes sense. I want to switch topics here and talk about roles. I know not every person on here probably either wants to be on air. Some people might want to be in production. Some people might want to be in print journalism or use more social media and things like that. So I wanted to bring Ray in, and I know you said you work with a lot of freelance journalists. Can you explain what a freelance journalist is for folks who might not know?
Yeah, so for us, our freelance journalists come from the community. I can't think of somebody who doesn't live here in Tampa Bay. They come to us with story pitches, or maybe I'll see their byline somewhere else, and I will ask them if they're interested in writing a story, and they get paid per story. However, we do have one freelancer who just works a set amount of hours, and we pay her a set amount of money for those hours, and then we pay extra by the project if she does anything else. So they're contract workers. They are 1099 workers, and I was a 1099 worker for a really long time. My spouse absolutely hated it because our tax return just went away. So I mean, as a caveat, if you are 1099 and end up doing a lot of freelance, get your taxes in order and make sure you're setting aside money. But that's what a freelance writer is. For us, and we're very lucky to have a nice small group of really devoted writers who are really good at the thing that that they write for us. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely does, but I feel like because we're in a pandemic and we're probably seeing an influx in freelance journalists taking jobs, whether it's in print, whether it's on air, whether it's in news, whatever it may be, whatever medium it is. So what does it take to land a freelance job? Because like it could be Joe Schmo coming at you like, yo, I got this story. Like, what's up? So how does one actually get a freelance gig?
So I'll use one of our newer contributors. I say new, but it feels like I've known her for a really long time. Her name is Mckenna Shuler. Over the summer, she's a copywriter by trade. So she has a day job where she does that. But she pitched a story about restorative justice some weeks after the George Floyd incident and the protests here. And she wanted to help explain what restorative justice is and what this particular movement locally was trying to do. So she sent me that pitch. She sent me a very thorough story, um, and we loved it. I hadn't seen anything like that about this particular topic. Obviously, last summer was a difficult time for a lot of newsrooms, trying to figure out how to cover um, the aftermath of the George Floyd incident and really the things that mattered. I mean, I know in Tampa it was a crazy summer, and it's been crazy. It's still happening now if you're covering police and police reform. So as far as Mckenna goes, she was just so good at being specific about the things she wanted to write about. She didn't ask too many questions in the beginning. She didn't know that I was open to all those questions, but now, I mean, we talked. She tweeted something last night, said somebody had signed up to run against Richie Floyd in the District 8 seat for the St. Petersburg City Council. And I emailed her right away. I said, hey, it's kind of like your beat now. Did you want to just do a quick blog post about the opponent, who they are, and kind of remind people who Richie is? Because Richie had been running unopposed until November. Richie is technically a Democratic Socialist. It's a nonpartisan race. But the things we talk about here have to do with a lot of democratic values that the Democratic Socialist Party talks about. And so we're interested in talking about those ideas because that's on brand for us. Not that like we're a brand. Like, believe me, if I didn't have to write about workers trying to make more money, I wouldn't. But like for us, it's like that's what we write about, and she understood that, and she's able to provide that alternative view and voice for our readers, which is something that this paper feels it is called to do. Write about things that are a little bit outside of the box, a little bit uncomfortable, and a little bit, I don't know, controversial. Everybody thinks we want to be controversial just to be controversial. Like, I don't. I'd rather not have people like mad at me or anything, but we write about the things we have to write about. And she was very good at that. So for us, that's how she stood out.
Oh, excuse me. Would you say if a student wants a freelance gig, what should they be looking for? Should they be looking up the editor-in-chief and just kind of shooting them an email? And how does that process work?
I think it's been interesting to hear everybody talk about TV and how that works, but I think it's kind of the same. Kind of see which writers are writing about the things that you care about. Right. I always used to call reporters on the phone when I'd read the newspaper when I was working at a bar. Like, hey, I really like this story. Or I'd ask a question about the story. So, or if you feel like a writer missed something, give them a tip. Be like, hey, check this out. And then take it a step further and be like, hey, I have this tip on the story you wrote. It might be a good follow-up. I can even do it for you. Here's some clips for you that I've written. Or if you don't have clips, be like, hey, I've written these for class. I think I can do, be very specific about what you send. Be like, I can do a quick 500-word update. And we're all talking in print here, web, and get that to you. By now, here are my sources, and I would like to do this for you. Would you like to look at it on spec? Here's what I want to make. I definitely say, be specific about the amount of money you want to make. I know that's hard, but ask for what you want, and make the editor and the person making that decision tell you yes or no, and be frank with you too. I think that's really important. I hate the dance of like figuring out what to pay people. I just kind of say, here's what I can max out at. Can you help me out? Like, can we do this or not? And if not, I want you to get the story out somewhere else. So just being straightforward.
Awesome. Money, we gonna get to that. We
Okay. Good.
Oh, we gonna talk about money. we are talking about money today. But before we get to money, I want Alexis. Alexis is an MMJ, which is basically kind of like how everybody starts. Started from the bottom. Started, yes, as an MMJ. So Alexis, tell us what life is like as an MMJ, what you have to do, and girl, just my heart.
Yeah, I think it's very important when you start out as an MMJ to not get discouraged, because there's just going to be moments where you're just like, man, like I could have done better. Like I could have shot that better. I could have wrote that better. But I think you can't get so caught up in it, because it's easy to get caught up in the things that you could have did better as a MMJ. Well, I can all just say about my experience. So I started out on dayside. So dayside reporters at our station have to turn in 2 packages a day. And so it was very important to know how to manage your time. And I think that's very important as a MMJ, because you may stay too long at your story, and then you may miss your deadline because now you have to play catch up because you stayed too long interviewing that person, when that interview could have just been 5 minutes tops. So I think that's really important as an MMJ. And I think that's what a lot of us, even just seeing my friends come in, we struggled with at first, is time management, because you're doing everything. So you need to make sure you are on top and you give yourself deadlines. Like when I first started out at the station, I would put my alarm clock on so I can know, okay, I stayed here a little bit too long. Now I got to write a little bit faster. I got to edit a little bit faster. And so I could meet my deadline. So I think being an MMJ, if I could put it together, it's like just this beautiful chaos of you trying to get things done on your own. And it made like you're running and you're just going all over the place, but at the end of the day, it's going to come out and turn out to something beautiful.
Let's talk about pitches. So when you come in, do you already have to have your pitches? I know you said you're working mornings now, so it might be a little bit different, but working dayside, where are you getting your pitches from? Are you having to pitch? Give us a breakdown of all of that.
So yeah, when you come in for the meeting, the morning meeting, you do have to have at least 3 pitches on you. I would say I got a lot of my stories from just not only just giving my cards out and just word of mouth and people telling me about stories, but also going on social media. Social media is really important, especially as an MMJ, because that's where a lot of your stories can come from. Also just looking at just national stories and how can I localize this story? How can I find a central character for this story that people can relate to in this market? So that's how I went about, and that's how I still go about finding my stories, a lot from social media and just a lot of what's going on in the world and how can I localize it to my station.
I want to bring in Sarah when it comes to that. Talk about enterprising stories, the importance of enterprising stories, and how student journalists, folks who are in college, can enterprise stories.
Well, for me, enterprise, and Jasmine can tell you, it's the most important thing to me is enterprise coverage, because there's so many sources of news. You have to have something that you can't get off of somebody else's Twitter feed or something like. It needs to be original ideas, and it might even come from that Twitter feed, but what have you done as a journalist with the access that you have as a journalist, and the responsibility you have as a journalist to take it further. So to me, original reporting is the most important thing. How to do that in college. I think that Alexis had some really good ideas about taking things that maybe are what I would call commodity news, or news that everyone knows, press releases, current events, national, and thinking about where the depth to that story is that would impact individuals' lives, and then enterprise that angle. Enterprise the angle of the impact instead of focusing on, we call them a nuts and bolts package of just what happened, the who, what, when, where. But if you spend time on the why, you will get to an enterprise package. And I think that's a good way. If you don't have a ton of sources because you're still in college, that's a good way to do some original content, is really focus on the why. And I will tell you, some news brands just in general don't do a great job with the why. So if you can do a great job with the why, then you're already, I think, going to be leaps and bounds ahead of other people. But that said, you know, just talking to the person that you walk in to the, you know, convenience store and having conversations with them instead of trying to keep your head down and get in and out quickly. And then you can do that in college, just same way, you know, our journalists do it every day once they have the job. Talk to people that you wouldn't normally talk to. Talk to people in different communities than you live in. Talk to people that that you encounter on one story. Ask them while you're still at the story if they've heard of any other stories that you need, because you would be losing a fantastic opportunity. And people do it all the time where they rush in and rush out and forget to ask about any other stories that that person might have. And you could even knock out an interview on that in that same moment, and save that for later, for when you're on deadline and you've spent too much time on your first story. You have this interview already in the can, ready to go. And, you know, you will make your news director very happy that they didn't have to help find you your second story. You already had that ready to go.
Hey, Sarah, I was going to jump in here as my Siri thinks it's Sarah. It's not. I was going to say, when we're talking about like college stories or ways for original reporting in college, yes, it's really hard because I tell college students all the time, you don't know what the real world is. Like, try being a 22-year-old in your first job and talking to people about property taxes. You've never even owned a home. You don't know what that is. So while you're in school, you can do things that matter to students. And I would say probably one of the biggest examples was when the stimulus checks came down and a lot of college students weren't eligible. These are literally people you see, and you could be one of those people every day. You know the depths of what it takes to be a college kid and how poor you are. I've been there before, I know, and who says you couldn't do a story about that? And the money that, like, maybe, you know, walk around and ask kids what they would do if they had that extra $1,400, and why they're pissed that they don't, or, you know, maybe they have work study and that invalidates them for the check or whatever, like things like that. I think you can also look at tuition hikes. Right now, the big story is Bright Futures and how that could be taken away. Like, how many people does that affect? And like, that's something that you could go on campus and like work your resources and do good stories. So just because you're not in the real world, the college world has just as much effect and impact and influence on like what happens to the outside world. So I think you can absolutely like find stories on campus that aren't necessarily like only students would care about this, but the bigger stories that would make a 6 o'clock newscast.
Absolutely. And I want Sarah and Alexis, feel free to chime in whenever you want, but when it comes to doing a story, writing a story, I think college students are like, oh, I got this down pat. You know, maybe they've been in several classes and so they can write the story, but then when they get on camera, it's like, who did it and why? So talk about maybe some advice that you have for people to start getting a little bit more comfortable in front of the camera. And then Alexis, you can speak to what you did to even get comfortable in front of the camera.
Well, I do spend time coaching people how to get comfortable in front of the camera. I personally never been in front of the camera and am not comfortable. So I do as I say, not as I do for this. And I will be upfront that I've never had to face what Alexis and Jasmine face of having to get comfortable. But as I said with the voicing, stand up, you know, I even tell people sometimes just shake it off before you start, get loose, because the most awkward thing or the visuals of on camera is stiff arms or looking like you're posing. I've seen that a lot, especially with the more that people are used to taking, taking pictures now. I would even say selfies. Sometimes that could hurt you because you know how to stand in the perfect way to look better or whatever. Don't be thinking about that when you're on a stand-up. Be thinking of your environment. Be thinking of what you're saying. Please, if you are focused on your on what you look like on camera, it's going to come across so stiff, and it is just not going to be natural. So that would be my advice for getting natural in front of the camera. Is it's easier said than done, because I don't know anybody that doesn't think about what they look like on the air, and so I can say it all day, but really do try to focus on what you're saying and on your environment, as opposed to what you're seeing. If you're looking at a viewfinder of yourself, because you will stand so stiff, or you will stand like you're in a still picture when you're in moving video. So that would be Alexis. You better than
yeah. Alexis, chime in and tell us what you did.
Well, when it comes to, okay, so I remember when I first went live, I was freaking out. But I think the best way to think about it, well, the way to approach it is just, we have a script, right? But sometimes you may not remember everything that you wrote and you sent to your producer to proof. Like, you're just not gonna remember it. So I feel like when you're going live, do not focus on so much on your script, and don't get hung up. I had one of the other MMJs, he's been there for a while, he told me, don't get tangled up, tangle on. So don't get caught up with you, oh my God, like I went off script. Just go on with it, continue on, and continue talking. Also, what I did to get comfortable, I'm trying to think of different things. I had, when I was interning at Channel 8, Shannon Bacon, Better Call Bacon, she told me when she first started out, to get comfortable, she would, like, when she goes live, she would limit it to 2 sentences, in and out. And I think that was the best advice anyone gave me, honestly, was because when you're first starting out, you're freaking out, you're getting nervous. And so you can't remember a whole paragraph. You just can't. I know you may, I mean, if you have great memory, maybe you can. But starting out, I know I was nervous. And so just practicing just 2 sentences in, 2 sentences out really helped me. And also, just as time went on, I was just like, oh, I can add another sentence, and I can add another sentence. And then I could do a full straight live. And so I think that's what I can give.
Some really great advice.
Ain't no shame in that. I was doing 8 live shots before I got moved to Dayside, thank you, Jesus. And I would do, to save my butt, I would do 2 in, remember the 3rd or 4th going into VO just in case they didn't take it, and 2 out. And I would still, like, my EP would try to write extra stuff. I'd be like, no, I can't remember all that. I won't do it. And I used to remember scripts. I used to be a musical theater kid. So it's, even for people in it who've been in it for a long time, 2 sentences is a great max to be comfortable and, like, say what you got to say and then move on. But Deanne, you ad lib all day. Like, that's something you do for being a traffic ganger. You don't have scripts.
Yeah. I do ad lib literally all day, and that's a good thing. And sometimes you never know what you're gonna get, so it just depends. But I was actually a morning reporter at WFLA for, I would say, maybe about 6 or 7 months, and then my previous job in Charleston, South Carolina, I was the weekend anchor, and I was the nightside reporter. So I totally agree with Alexis. Start small, and then you'll realize, like, oh shoot, okay, I think I kind of got this. But I did want to add on a couple of nuggets for people with working on getting comfortable in front of the camera. Your mirror is your best friend. So when I was in college, I would literally write a story, and I would go in my mirror, and I would just, like, practice it. And I would, like, go out the bathroom and walk in it and act like I'm talking to my friend. Like, girl, I gotta tell you this story. Or, oh my gosh, mom, I gotta tell you this story. That was something that really helped me get comfortable with just, like, speaking, especially when it comes to, because I think a lot of people say, like, oh, just be yourself on camera. But as Jasmine said, like, how am I being myself when I'm talking about property taxes? Like, I don't know nothing about property taxes. Like, who am I sitting down and talking about property taxes with? So, like, you just work on these things. And if you do it in front of a mirror, that's one thing. And another thing I would say about your, about, like, a live shot, bullet points. Bullet points really help. So that way in your mind, you're not so tailored on, okay, I wrote this word after this word after this word, and I literally have to say this sentence verbatim. If you just write down bullet points, you remember just those nuggets, and you should know your story regardless. And so those are a couple of things that can definitely help folks get comfortable on camera. So I want to move on to where the money resides, the money conversation, because listen, it's hard out here in these streets, especially starting out in this business. So I want to start with Sarah. As a news director, what do you look for when someone is actually negotiating? Do you encourage freshman people, you know, straight out of college students to actually try to negotiate a contract that they just got?
So is this Sarah, the mentor, talking, or Sarah, the person that has to get the contract done? I'm just kidding.
Let's get both. Let's get both.
So I would say this. I say you should be realistic about what a budget is, and the fact that there is not a pot of gold in any news director's office that leads to an infinite amount of increase over what they offered. They usually are somewhere when they offer in the ballpark of what they have budgeted. That said, you guys should know that you should advocate for yourselves. You should know your worth, and you should know what you think you should be making, what you can afford to live on in a particular market. And it's very different. And I definitely look at the city you're going to. Make sure you do some of those calculators that are available online about if you make this here, you need to make this there. Those are important to know, because you will get vastly different offers in New York City versus Tampa. I mean, Tampa has a fairly low cost of living compared to many of the other big cities that are in the top 15 markets like Tampa is. So just know that up front. But it never hurts to ask. And actually, when I say never hurts, I feel like you should at least try to negotiate more. You know, as long as you're doing it within reason, you're not trying to double what the offer is, because, you know, that's not going to happen. And then it will just look like you're not coming in with a serious offer. I know many of you haven't bought a home, but there is a limit to how much you go asking for over list price before somebody kind of just walks away. But advocate for yourself. Think about what you're bringing, what your end goal is, and then be honest with them about why you think not that price, but this price, because I've looked at this, and this factor. Go in not just with a number in mind, but again, the why. The same as with stories, go in with the why. And, you know, you may have a little more luck with news directors, and every news director is different, and every time period is different. There are certain years where my budget is my budget, right? And I don't have a lot of room to go back and forth with lots of different people. Like Ray was saying, just being upfront right at the beginning. Here's what I have. If that doesn't work for you, I want us to both know that, you know, going forward. But, you know, there are news directors that go in low expecting to negotiate. And since you don't know which news directors those are, you're going to have to, you know, try to do a little bit of negotiation, I guess.
Absolutely. I want to loop Ray in, because Ray said it like, hey, tell me what you want. Like, let's work together. So talk a little bit about first of all, I need to figure out how to speak. Talk about what those conversations look like when you're discussing pay.
It was interesting to hear Sarah say that there are people who famously go low, and obviously you don't know it as the person coming in, but you know who does know is other people in this very small world of journalism that we live in. And I'm not necessarily encouraging you to talk, you know, crap or snoop around and get information about your potential employer, but ask the people who know the person you're going to be negotiating with what that was like. Definitely do that. So could you repeat the question again? Sorry. I want to make sure I answer it specifically, but I wanted to make a point about Sarah's point, how true that was.
Yeah, I was asking, what do those conversations look like when you're discussing pay as far as print? Are you hoping folks negotiate, and kind of like what's the end result there?
I guess it's different for every contributor. Some contributors need a little bit more work on their copy, so I do offer a little bit less, just because I know that it's going to be a process. It's a process I want to go through, but it's also a process that I know is going to eat up my time. So I invest time with them for our paper, for them, and for our relationship. Maybe pay them a little less, and I can tell you that if copy's coming in really clean and the package is very good, then you're probably going to get exactly what you asked for right off the bat, because it's going to be, a really light edit, just a few things back and forth. The package is there. I don't have to go scrambling for things. So that's what that looks like. I don't envy anybody who has to ask for money from somebody who's holding the purse strings. I think it's incredibly cruel, especially when there is a lot of there's doomspeak in journalism about nobody having money. Certainly true for us, but my publisher also has given us the ability. Just today was the first time he said, "Hey, we billed a little high last week. Maybe rein it in." So we talked about that, but ask for what you want. Ask ask your colleagues and people that you know what they're making. I know that a lot of people don't talk about that. I don't know why. We don't talk about what we make out in the open. I still haven't figured that part out. I'm probably wrong, and I'm probably an idiot, and I probably have no manners. But I feel like I don't know. How could journalism, an industry that is so about the truth and bringing things to light, not talk about what people are getting paid in the newsroom? And honestly, I think if we talked more openly about it, we'd have even better future journalists, because they'd be like, "Yo, I can do this for that." Like Sarah was talking about, this is what I need to live in Tampa. I love Tampa because you don't need to make a ton of money. You don't need to make San Francisco money or New York money or even Nashville money maybe to live here. But you got to ask for what you want, what you need. And a big thing I would say, if you're going to negotiate a contract and a salary, definitely go high. Do whatever you got to do. Hopefully the person on the other end is going to tell you what is realistic for them, but also demand a review every year. Demand a review and conversation, and cultivate that open relationship with the people who pay you, so that you can talk about not just strictly money, but how you're doing with your job, how you can be better at your job. And when that time comes for the review, which you've demanded, you're in a position to say, "Hey, I grew. I helped the paper grow. Here's what happened. What kind of raise am I in line for?" And that just sets you up to stay at that paper, not resent your paper, not resent your editor, not resent your publisher. And gosh, I think it's great for everybody.
Very good advice. Thank you so much, Ray. Before we're going to get to question and answers. So if y'all could start thinking of some questions you might have, I want to end this portion of the conversation with Alexis. If you aren't comfortable answering this question I'm about to ask, no worries. But I wanted to know, did you negotiate, and were you afraid to negotiate, being that you are just now entering the business? I think that's something that a lot of students can benefit from.
Let me tell you, I was terrified, because at this point I'm like, okay, I gotta be a big girl, because I never had to negotiate anything. And then here I am negotiating with somebody who's probably older than me, probably been in this business more than me. And so I'm about to tell you what I think I should get. That was so scary. But Rod told me that no one's gonna give me anything if I don't ask. And so what I agree with Sarah that I actually looked up so if I'm gonna live in this area, I need to know what my rent would be. And so I looked up what my rent would probably be, and I did negotiate, because I was just like, I can't live off of this. Like, yeah, this amount that you're giving me is just gonna pay for my rent that month. I'm going to need more, because I need to pay for groceries. I gotta pay for gas to get to the station that you want me to work at. So it is absolutely terrifying. I also would say, Rod told me to negotiate moving expenses. And I realized when I got to the station that I'm at that no one was told that, like the other MMJs, to negotiate moving expenses. So I feel like that should also be a part of the conversation too. Like, hey, I'm coming from Florida and I have to move to Mississippi. Can we negotiate how I'm going to get there? So I think that is also important to add to.
Yes, that's a very good nugget. And Alexis is talking about Rod Carter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rod Carter, he works currently at WFLA. Unfortunately, he's about to leave Tampa Bay, and it's not a loss only for our station, but for the entire Tampa Bay community. But he told me the very same thing when I was in college. Moving expenses is a good way to negotiate and get a little bit more money, especially depending on where your location is and where you're moving, which might be across the country. And then, of course, looking up housing and looking and telling them like what's real. I pride myself on always being a realist. Like, all right, y'all trying to offer me, let's say like first job, y'all trying to offer me $35,000, but my rent is $1,000 a month. I have a car note, I have an electric bill, I have Wi-Fi, I gotta get work. Let's be a little bit realistic and see like where can I have, is there a little bit more cushion? Could you give a little bit more so that I'm actually able to survive? And so I think that will definitely go a long way. So we want to open the floor for some questions. Has anyone put, I see I have one direct message. Okay, so this is for Ray. Do you enter into a formal contract with freelancers?
We don't have a contract per se. We should, dealing with a copyright issue today. And I feel like if I would have had like a better contract with the photographer than this other unrelated site that picked up their photo, we'd be in a better position. So I think we should. Right now, I don't have our freelancers sign any contract. The only thing they sign and submit to me is a W-9 and a direct deposit form. And we have lots of emails where we talk about what I'm going to pay them. I'm pretty upfront, like, here's what I want you to turn in. Here's what I can pay you. And we're not one of those papers where you have to chase down your money. So usually get paid. We pay out per week, but there's no contract. Now, if it's a staff, yeah, there's a contract. But with the freelancer, so there isn't one. However, there should probably be one, just as we navigate the legalities of certain people with certain political viewpoints not liking us anymore.
Ray, I was going to ask if you could elaborate a little bit more on, especially the pay part. I do recall there were some conversations like on Twitter about certain large magazines who were not paying their freelancers, and they had issues with that. And you know, is there any way that you can make sure that there's a hard date for pay, like in case they are like, oh, we're running late or we can't get this to you, just to make sure you're compensated on your end?
Yeah, I think just being straight up, like, I don't think a contract is a bad idea. Like, hey, when can I expect this to pay out? And like everybody, there's always warning flags. Like, you know them. Like if somebody's like, well, it could pay out here, then you're kind of like, well, that's kind of ambiguous. But we'll say there's a website called Defector that I like a lot, and they have a section on their website that says how to pitch Defector and our freelance contract, and it just straight up says when you'll get paid, how you'll get paid, like the pay structure. So they'll say, let's say they pay you $1,000, they'll pay you $200 once the beginning comes in. If some other reporter takes your idea and runs with it, they'll pay you a certain amount, but it's all there in writing. So I think the only way to get around that is to get it in writing. And I think as we go forward in a world that demands more fairness and transparency and less gatekeeping and less of that kind of BS, that paper contracts will be more relevant. And I hope they do become like that because it's better for everybody.
All right, thanks, Ray. We are going to move Brad. Brad has a question. Do I have to click on Brad? No, right?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi, how's it going, everybody? So I'm Brad. I'm a graduating senior. I'm the executive producer of the Florida Focus Show. And I have a couple questions, and they're mostly for Sarah Moore. First off, thank you for coming. And second, I was wondering what you're looking for someone who's applying to become a producer. I know you touched on anchoring, but producing is what I want to do. So, and then I have a follow-up.
Yes. All right. As a former producer, I say, I think you're right. Producing is the way to go. And I think Jeanette would tell you the same thing. We need more producers. So everyone on this call, if there is any possibility that you would enjoy and love to shape the entire show, please consider producing. When I told you that, I have one on-air position right now open, and I have already received, and it's been open. It actually just posted today. It's people have known that it was coming, but it posted today, and I already have 75 at least reels in there. Now, I'm not saying all these reels are reels that are gonna make a final cut, but I at least have that. So I have 4 open producer positions at the station between our OTT positions and newscast positions. And I don't have 4 candidates. So really consider producing. But anyway, there's my hard pitch for producing, and Brad's already made the decision. So what do I look for? I look for creative showcasing. I think first job out, make sure your writing's clean. I'll start there. First job out, make sure your writing is clean and as active voice as possible. And I'm sure Jeanette talks to you about that. It's important, and it's easy to fall into a habit because passive voice isn't wrong, but it is sure harder for the ear to follow. So since we're writing for the ear, write in active voice, and practice it, and look over your copy and highlight any passive voice sentences you have and see if you can make them active, and do that before you send a tape out, for sure. Next thing is be prepared for a writing test. So I know I've never worked anywhere where the producers don't go through a writing test, because there's very little that you can send in terms of a reel that I'm going to know that you did the majority of the work. It's different than an on-air reel. So we do writing tests for all producers. And so you'll have to be quick with the active voice. And most writing tests are designed to see how fast you are. Because, one of the first producer positions in the door is weekend mornings. And Jasmine can tell you all about it because she just came off of working it. It's a beast. And most of your first jobs are going to be the hardest ones to produce because they will be the longest shows. I don't know why it is, and one would think that I would be the one that would know that, but I don't know why it is, but it is. And so you need to be fast. You need to be a fast writer. You need to be decisive. You can't spend 30 minutes trying to find one story to put in your B block. You need to be decisive about what belongs there. So those should be what a good writing test looks for, is your decision making. I know our writing test, I'll just give you a quick glimpse at what it is. It asks you to pick out of 10 stories, it asks you to pick 3 that you would write for a newscast, and then it asks you to write them, and then it asks you to write the teases for them. So all of that decision making is in there, all of the writing skills are in there, the speed is in there, and then your ability to be creative with teases. Because if there's one thing that can elevate a producer, it's that they write a good tease. So practice that and avoid cliches and teases. I see a lot of that, especially with new producers, is cliches and teases. So really try to avoid that.
Brad, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, one, I would love to know what those cliches are, but the real question I had was, when an anchor wants to elevate themselves, they do really, really active stand-ups, right? And that sets them apart. When producer does that, you know, what does a producer have to do in order to know their worth? You know, how do you know that you want, how do you know that you're able to make more money than the rest of the people? Because truthfully, I'm very confident in my skills, and you know, I'm ready, but I want to know how much money I'd be worth. I know you can't answer that. I have a number in my head, but
$1 million, Brad. So creative showcasing. That's the difference between a show stacker and a producer. And a lot of people come out of school as a show stacker, and that's where you're going to earn your second job, your big market job, the one, you know, the 6 p.m. or 11 p.m. news. That's going to be because you showcase and you know how to make your anchors look good. Make your anchors look good, and your anchors will advocate for you to get the next role. And so relationships with anchors as a producer, I cannot stress enough. If your anchor has feedback for you, not to say that you're still the producer, and in the end, you know, the buck always stops with the producer. So sometimes you have to make a decision and roll with it, but keep a good relationship with your anchors, because they're the ones that will advocate for you to go to the next level. Or they will advocate to your boss that they can't lose you. So you need to do whatever it is you need to do to keep that person. Your anchor is the one that's going to do that.
Brad, did you have one more question, or are you all good? All good?
yeah,
all
I'm
right.
good.
All right, $1 million producer has left the building. Let's head on over to Deanna. She has her hand raised.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deanna. Thanks so much for taking your time to speak with us today. So I am actually more on the reporting and anchoring side, although I'm not opposed to producing. But I do have 2 questions for Lexi, and I have one for Sarah. So Sarah, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind. My first question is, what made you stay at your first station for so long? Because if I'm not mistaken, they said that you were at your first station for 13 years. So what was it that stuck out to you that you were like, I want to be in this place? I can see myself growing here.
Continuous advancement and opportunity. I think I grew into new jobs. Like starting an intern, you have a lot of room to grow. But I grew into new positions every couple of years. So that's important. Know that the place you're going believes in internal advancement. Whether it's within the station or within the company, know that they're into that, because, you know, sometimes you can get stuck in one role, especially, you know, there are times where I've seen it or I've heard from other places, and this didn't happen to me there, so I can't speak to it. You're so good in what you do that there is a hesitancy to advance you. That's not a place you want to be. You want to be somewhere where they reward you with advancement when you're good. But that's why I stayed there 13 years. That plus I grew up in Nashville, and it was in Nashville. So that's a pretty good thing that doesn't happen all the time. You know, a station that feels like family, which is also something you should look. We talked about money earlier, and that is important. But before you ask how much money is at a place, talk to people about what it's like to be there. If they, you know, if at the end of the day they feel drained, or if they are pleased with the product that they put out and the people that they worked with, you will stay at a place for longer, regardless of money. If you at the end of the day, you feel rewarded.
Awesome. Thank you. This might be a little bit of a taboo topic. I'm not sure, but I feel like we should talk about it. Are there any immediate red flags as new journalists that we should avoid going into a station, or when we're interviewing, that we know to look for? We should know to look for, at least.
Sorry, was that for me again?
I feel like you could probably answer that.
Was that for Alexis?
that's for honestly anybody that could speak to it. It just popped in my head.
Red flags. I don't know. Jasmine, what do you look for? What would you tell people about our newsroom? It's hard, management probably is the one thing you're looking for. And so I'm management. So maybe I'm not the person to ask, but you should know that about the management style and whether it meshes with what you're going to like, whether the feedback. Ray talked about making sure that there's regular feedback. Ask about that in the interview process. When people ask me what our feedback process is, and I am able to talk about something fairly specific in what we do, I think that's important. And it also tells me that that person wants to grow. So it's a really good question to ask during an interview of what kind of feedback you will get.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, now I have my questions for Lexi. So what I wanted to ask you was, how is it like to anchor and produce at the same time? Is that very hectic for you? What are your thought processes like that going into work every day, knowing that you're on air and also having to like formulate what you're going to say?
It's no joke. It's no joke at all. It is, when I first had to do it, I was just like panicking, because you're just thinking about so many things at once, because you're thinking about how you're going to look on air, but then you're like, okay, but I got to focus on getting this story done. I mean, this rundown all filled in and done before I think about even how I'm going to look on camera. So I think just give yourself enough time, especially when you're first starting out producing and anchoring. So just kind of give yourself enough time to get all your stories in, and then give yourself enough time to get ready and prepare yourself and calm down, because you probably was a little bit stressed because you was trying to fill in your A block. So just calm down and then get in front of the camera. So I think just give yourself enough time is the best advice I could give for that one.
Thank you. And if you don't mind me asking, what's your timeline like for your day when you're doing those type of things?
Just reporting, or
doing the anchoring and producing as well, because I feel like that's more common in smaller markets, right, where you'd have to be doing both.
So there's a 6 o'clock, I believe there's a 6 o'clock, 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 10 o'clock. And so when you're first coming in, I was coming in at like 2 so I can get everything ready for the 6. And then you would want, because a lot of people, what they would do, they would just copy over, and it's just verbatim the same thing on all the other newscasts. And so it just sounds exactly the same. So I would just say, give yourself enough time in between those. Well, I give myself enough time in between those to kind of switch it up, switch up the order a little bit, so people won't feel like they're hearing the same thing, like verbatim.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for answering my questions. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, thanks, Deanna. We have a couple more questions from folks. I'm going to, I do not want to mess this up. Miss Larkin.
Good, you got it. Okay, I knew it was coming, it's fine. Hi, I'm Neve. Thank you for taking this evening to talk to all of us. I have 2 questions, one quick, one anyone can jump in on. I think I'm going for producing when I graduate at the end of this semester. Yeah. But I was kind of wondering, as someone applying right out of college, what kind of producing position should I go for? Should I go for an AP or straight to producer, or what is kind of the different standards for both positions, I guess?
Market size and where you want to live will determine that. You can absolutely go into a smaller market right into a producer job. If you want to go mid-size market where I started, in the Nashville number, about 25 through 45 market size, I would say go in as an AP. And there's not many entry level producing roles in anything higher than that market size. But you know, you can quickly get there in fewer stops for sure in the producer route. But I would say it really depends on where you want to go. I liked coming up through the AP personally from midsize. That was just me personally, because I felt like I had a lot to learn that I didn't learn in college. And you guys may be in a much better situation, because Jeanette may have prepared many of you more than I was prepared coming out. I needed to watch experienced producers before I produced myself. And that is better done in an AP role, I think, in a mid-market.
Thank you. That helps a lot, actually. That kind of leads into my next question, which anyone is welcome to answer. So I'm not tied to Florida, Tampa, or anything. My family's in Orlando, but like I want to go wherever I can while I can before I get tied down somewhere. How do you choose where you want to live? Like I haven't traveled a lot across the states, but just like, how do you pick when you can go anywhere, I guess?
What a wonderful choice to have in front of you. I love that. And I love that freedom that you have. What kind of lifestyle are you an outdoor? I mean, that's going to be super personal. There's no way anyone else can answer that for you. Are you an outdoor person? Do you like hikes? Do you like snow? Do you not like snow? These are questions you should know, because if you don't like snow, do not go where there's a lot of it, because you will be out in it, even if you are not a reporter. So yeah, just know your likes and dislikes, and that's where I would tailor the city. And look at the company too. I mean, I think it's got to be said right now, you need to look at the company that owns the newsrooms, and if you're comfortable in that company. There's a lot of great companies. That was not an advocate for one company over another, but you should know what company you would feel comfortable with based on what you know.
That helps a lot. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those questions. And Peyton chimed in and said that they wanted to ask a question. Where is Peyton?
I'm here. Hi. So I'm pursuing a career in producing, and since all of you have different roles in a newsroom, Deanne, Alexis, Sarah, Jasmine, I was wondering if you guys could share your favorite things that a great producer does when you work with them every day.
You sweet, sweet child. Oh my gosh. That's, my heart's full. I was gonna say, for me, I'm a very hands-on anchor. I rewrite literally every single one of my scripts. No script goes untouched. And before, this weekend, I was doing 3 hours of news on a Saturday and 2 hours of news on a Sunday. I love source copy. So just in case I have a question, and I've also produced too, producers got a lot of stuff on their plates. So if you can, the less I have to bother you, the better I feel, because I know that you're ripping and running. So sometimes it helps, like, I will ask them like, hey, where'd you get this? Because I need to clarify this, or I want to rewrite this a little bit better. So for me, it always helps, like, when you tell me like, oh, I pulled this story. Sometimes I'll even write the story for you. If you just throw in the link, I'll just do all that for you. So yeah, it helps when you know exactly where the source copy is. And it's hard to do that when you just drag and drop from the last shows. Because you'll be just like, I don't know where I got that. That's just from what happened at the 5 o'clock. And it's like, okay, well, it's happened in every newsroom where someone gets something wrong, but because it gets dragged over and over and over again, you keep making the same mistake over and over until somebody goes like, oh, that's weird, I want to clarify this like really quick. And then sometimes that's how you catch mistakes. So I think having a good idea of where your source copy is, whether that's the press release, the web article, the Slack message, whatever, that would really help your producer, or your anchors. Just having that just general knowledge of what you're talking about. I think it's hard because we do news every day, and especially producers, y'all touch a lot of news, but to have that knowledge of like, I know a good chunk of this story. You may not know all of what's going on with the 1.9 trillion COVID bill, but you know enough that if I had a question or a clarification, then maybe you'd be like, I know where to find this, or yeah, I know the story well enough to where I could tell you the answer. So that always helps for me.
I think really quickly, I'll chime in to your question, Peyton. So I think my overall answer boils down to communication. So serving kind of 3 different roles: general assignment reporter, an anchor, I now fill-in anchor at my station, and then as a traffic anchor. When I'm out in the field, cues and constantly being in communication with the people who are back at the station, that is so pivotal, because that also takes a lot of the stress off of what we are dealing with out in the field. So if I know, like, when you all are coming to me, if I'm tagging out in boxes, do I need to sig out and all of that stuff? If I have a producer who is over communicating, it helps, and it kind of eases you a little bit, because you're dealing with everything else you're dealing with out in the field. And that's the same thing in my day-to-day role as a traffic anchor, but also that communication when it comes to your show. So as a producer, that is your show. Like Sarah talked about, like that's your baby. So at the end of the day, like, you have the final say, but an anchor is also there to like work with you to make sure that we both are producing the best thing that we can put out there for our viewers. So there should be a great relationship. And that's what I value with a lot of our producers, is having that communication to where we now have an established relationship, so that if I have a question, or if I think, oh, okay, maybe we should do this story before this story, or maybe we should rewrite this or retailor this, there's no like, oh, you don't think I know what I'm doing, or oh, there's a, so you build that relationship. And that I think is very beneficial for producers and for anchors and reporters.
I agree. I was just actually going to say the same thing. Communication. I think I have no clue what's going on inside the news station while I'm about to go live. Like, I have no clue what's going on. I don't know if I'm 30 seconds out, 15 seconds out. And so I think it's really important when producers are just so vocal and they give you a heads up, because in small markets, some things happen. I don't know so much about bigger markets, but in small markets, things just happen. There's sometimes where your package is just not able to run. They can't, for some reason.
Girl, that happens right here in Tampa too, every day.
Sometimes they can't get your package. So don't tell me, like, as soon as I'm about to go live, that you can't get my package, because now I'm stuck and I wasn't prepared for this. Now I have to try to, like, in a few seconds, try to think of words and try to think of what my package was about and who said what. So I think it's really important to just give people heads up and communicate with them, especially reporters, the whole time. There's one reporter well, all of them are great, but there's one, she's like the GOAT at communication, and everybody loves her because you never feel like she's letting you down, or you always feel like she has your back, because she's constantly communicating with you what's going on throughout the day.
Great advice. Thanks for the question, Peyton. Did you have another question? Okay. I have one.
If Sarah wanted to chime in on what makes a producer. Ooh, you're muted, possibly.
But you guys said it. You said anything I would want to say. Calm, though. I would say the one area where I would get complimented as a producer was calm, and that even when the whole show is falling apart, I never had an anxious voice in the ear, because my anchors have to not know how stressed I am in the booth. If they know how stressed I am in the booth, they will get stressed out there, and then the viewers will see that stress. And the last thing you want is for the viewers to think anything other than that everything is under control. So never let your anchors hear you panic. Never, I would say if you can never raise your voice, that's a good practice in the newsroom. And I don't mean yelling. I mean, obviously don't yell. That is no longer acceptable in newsrooms, but well, there was a time. But I would say that just never letting that your pitch get to a level of frenetic. Really practice the deep breath. If you need to take a deep breath before you push the button on the IFB, do it. your anchors will appreciate you, and that's part of that relationship.
Ooh, yeah, that was great. RT, retweet, all of that. There's actually another question coming in for you, Sarah. So could a student coming out of college get a producer job in a top 20 market? / have you ever seen Florida Focus this semester?
Could it happen? Yeah, I suppose it could. I'm not sure what's happening in markets 14 through 20, but it doesn't happen frequently. And I'll tell you what, I don't think you want, as much as the pay is great and you want to be there, I don't think you want to start in market 13. You want to make your mistakes on a smaller stage. And because you're going to, we all do, we make mistakes as a producer, all of it. And the bigger the audience, the harder it is to make that mistake and bounce back quickly, even just for yourself. Your own mental bounce back after a mistake is going to be so much harder in market 13. I certainly would not have wanted to get to a top 20 market my first job.
Sarah, could you maybe talk a little bit about the like feeder markets or pipeline markets, like a Sarasota for a Tampa, or like a Bakersfield for an LA, like that kind of thing, about kind of if you want to end up in these large markets, maybe you'd want to play to these nearby smaller markets that would help you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few markets where for some reason, I tend to have people from. I don't know that I go looking for it as a feeder market, but maybe they set you up well for this market. I tell you, we have hired a lot of people out of the Birmingham market lately. Birmingham it's a good news market for the size, with the size that it is. They have a lot of news. They do have really good stations that emphasize good journalism and good practices. So I would say that for some reason, I get a lot of people out of Birmingham. But I would say more for our station, what is happening more and more, especially what we're trying to do more and more of it is within a company. So if you want to have a station in mind that you want to get to, go to a smaller station within the same company, and then work through the recruiting department of that company to move up into the market you want.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. So I know it's getting late. Personally, I know that because my alarm clock goes off at 1:47 tomorrow morning. So I want us to wrap up. I want to ask our panelists to kind of give their final words and last advice to the students who are still on the call. I wanted to add just a tiny tidbit about markets. I would say my advice as far as markets, set a goal for yourself, but also don't be so keen on taking a job because of the size of that market. So I set a goal for myself coming out of college. I wanted to go top 100 because I believed I worked hard enough to land a job top 100. But when I got an offer from market 47 versus market 92, it doesn't mean that I take market 47 because it's a larger market. Ms. Larkin said, you know, how do I pick a job? Well, maybe that city isn't for you. Maybe the type of newsroom, like Sarah mentioned before, if you want to work in a breaking news newsroom and they're all about features, like that's not a place for you. So make sure you're taking a job because it's what best suits you and your goals and your future goals and what sets you up for your life, rather than just doing it based off of one pay and off of market size. That's my tidbit. So I'll ask our panelists to give us their final thoughts and any last minute advice that they have.
Okay, so I have one little piece of advice. And it may be, I don't know, Sarah, if you may like this or agree with it, but when I was at Fox and when I was interning, there's a reporter called, what's his name? Jordan Bowen, or I forget his last name, but he told me, so every station has a set style for their emails. So like my station is at WTBA.com, and it's your first initial and then your last name. And so I was so worried when I was applying to jobs, like, how are they going to, it's a bunch of people applying, how are they going to see my stuff? Like, how am I going to stand out in just a pool of other applications? And so he said, what you do is you try to find who's the news director or the manager, and you try to find out the station's set email style and email them your stuff directly. And it worked for me. It may sound a little stalkerish because you have to look up who the news director is, but each person that I found, each news director, and I sent them my reel, my resume, and a quick email, they got back to me. And I think sometimes, especially during a pandemic and you're coming out of college, sometimes you have to take that extra mile. And I know it may seem like, oh my God, that's a little bit weird that you're trying to find who the news director is and trying to put the emails together and stuff like that. But I mean, we look at people on Facebook and social media when we're about to go on dates. So what's the difference with this one? So that's the advice I would give, the last piece of advice I would give. And also to just, I think, keep your faith up. I think it's easy to get discouraged, especially if somebody's not, you have an interview and they didn't pick you, or if you're just not hearing back from people right away. And a lot of times people are just telling you, oh, it's hard during the pandemic. It's hard during the pandemic. You may not get the job you want. You may not land a job right now. And so it's easy to get discouraged. And I think to surround yourself with people that are constantly going to encourage you and constantly remind you that this is something that you've been wanting for this long. This is something that you've been working hard for these 4 years or longer in college. So just don't give up on that.
I can add, my last piece of advice can play off of Alexis. Yes, find the news director. Absolutely. And hopefully the news director isn't hard to find. You know, you can Google me and my email will be there. Definitely, because here's the important thing to note. If you only send it through the recruiting department, which you will need to do anyways, don't skip that and just send to the news director, do both. But if you only do that, you're ceding ground to everyone that has an agent. If you have an agent, your agent is sending it directly to the news director, and they're not worried about you know, annoying a news director. The agents will go ahead and send it. You get in there too. You get in that inbox just as if you had an agent. And then I would also say finding the balance of being persistent versus being overly persistent. I don't know what the right term was. My email can be a mess. Like I said, as soon as I opened that position, my email got flooded. So if you don't hear back from the news director, it automatically does not mean that they did not like your reel. It might mean that they put it aside and was like, I'm going to watch that when, you know, there is not a 4-alarm fire going on. And then they don't get back to it. I had one the other day where it was someone who was going to be in town. I did want to meet with that person, and I could not go back and find the email. For the life of me, I don't know why I couldn't find it to respond to that person, but I remembered that I needed to. And thankfully that person sent through hey, just checking in on this. Do that, pop it back to the top of my inbox. Unfortunately, the amount of email that comes into any newsroom and to the news director specifically is crazy. So pop it back up to the top. But then, you know, I wouldn't do it every day. I wouldn't call and write every day. But if it's been a week and you haven't heard, pop it back to the top of their inbox. Because I believe I owe Peyton an email that I promised her last Friday. And so I'm going to send it right after this. So sometimes you need to actually pop up on a Zoom, and then I'll remember that I owe you an email.
And to piggyback off of popping up, whenever we all get back to popping up in real life, sometimes you need to just pop up in the room with that person and remind them of who you are. And I'll say you definitely have to be persistent. And it sounds like it's been really enlightening to listen to aspiring TV journalists, and then the things that the questions they have about their jobs and where they're gonna go. And I'll just say that, like, it sounds pretty daunting. I don't want to be in your position. It sounds like you have a lot of tough decisions to make in newsrooms. I can't imagine a camera being on me and those kinds of deadlines, breathing down my neck. But it sounds like you all want to be journalists first. And I think I would just remind you that your job is to make life better for people who feel like their life sucks or they're not getting heard. And your job is to make a difference in the community that whichever one you land in, that to have viewers that trust you and readers that trust you. And I think that, obviously getting a job is going to be tough, but if you stick with that, even if you don't make your job and stand up for the people whose voices are being heard, then I think you'll end up happy, no matter where you live. Even if you hate snow and there's snow, if you find little ways to make a difference and do your job well and in the community that you're in at that given time, then I think you'll never probably have a problem, like being happy at least. And I think that's definitely a hard thing when you work in news. I always go up and down about how much I want to be in this, but I love it so much. So I think if you just stick with that and know that, and just find ways to make a difference, and you'll probably end up wherever the hell you want to end up because you're so good at your job.
Very well said. Very, very, very well said. Thanks, Ray. I want to end this with if Sarah, Alexis, Ray, Jasmine, I'll also do it. If we could all either drop our contact information, whatever you want to share, in the chat, or we could send it to Jeanette, whatever it might be. I just want to make sure, because there were a few more questions that came in, and I want to make sure that all the students are able to get their questions answered and make those connections and relationships with us.
Thank you guys so much for sticking around. We went a little bit longer, but we definitely want to make sure we got all your questions answered. Like I said, I'm the president of the Tampa Bay Association of Black Journalists, and we do plan to do another event within the year for our aspiring student journalists. If there's any way we can help you out, please let us know. Like I said, I'm the president. You can contact me directly. Another good way to stay abreast of all the things that we do is by going to our Facebook page. It's just facebook.com/TBABJ. We also have a Twitter, which is TBABJ. And then our Instagram is Tampa Black Journalists. I did reach out to your teachers with that info, so they also have the email address. We do take student members. I think your dues are $25, which is a lot cheaper. But yeah, if there's anything, like I said, that we can do to help you out, please don't be shy. Come to us. Like I said, I went to your teachers to kind of ask what they thought were pressing topics that you all wanted to hear about. So please feel free to hit my line if you guys have any topics we need to cover. It sounds like we need to have a producer boot camp or some type of something, because we got a lot of aspiring producers, and that is, Sarah says she's in. Sarah, you have no idea how I've gone to like NABJ conventions. Producers skip the lines. Like, it'll be a bunch of TV people and they'll be like, y'all, any producers? And then like a couple people raise hand and they will grab them. I've seen producers hired on the spot because they are in such need. If you ever want to pop up, if market, chasing is your thing, become a producer. You can go from like market 120 to market 2 in like 3 years flat if you really hone in. So like I said, please reach out to us. Jeanette is always a good liaison to us as well. But like I said, now that I'm in contact with your other teachers, if any of you guys are from UT or HCC, let them know and they can get in contact with me. But again, appreciate y'all so much for coming. And like I said, if there's anything that we can do for you, reach out. I did record this. We're going to post it. I will send the link to your professors and Jeanette and them via Gmail. And I've also been tweeting some stuff out, so I'll try to get some tidbits on there as well. Again, thank you guys so much. Have an amazing night. Stay safe out there. Good luck in the job hunt.
Thank you very much.